Welcome back to the Interfaiths program. I'm your host, Iqbal Akhtar, and we are here with a power couple, Stuart and Dianne, who are pillars of the Jewish community here, and they do a lot of remarkable work here in Israel in terms of supporting humanitarian causes. And they've been an integral part of our Muslim-Jewish dialogue group. And so we're going to start a little bit about their backgrounds, what got them interested, their own identity and kind of evolution in terms of being Jewish, and how they understand some of the challenges that we have today and their hopes for the future in terms of developing interfaith dialogue and relationships, and particularly Jewish-Muslim sort of engagement, which I think is something that is at the heart of the work that they do. So, who wants to start?
You start.
Okay, start.
Okay.
Let's do it. Give us a little bit about your background. Where do you come from? Who are you?
Well, I think it's important.
Okay.
I was born in 1940, which was 8 years before the establishment of the State of Israel.
Mm.
So I was kind of just becoming aware of things. And that does color my long-term views of things. But I was born into a family. We have 4 of us, 3 boys and a girl, in a pretty blue-collar community with a well-established middle-class Jewish community. Mm. And my family was not religious in the sense of observance, but we were very Zionistic, very involved, as I remember, in the State of Israel once it began to be established. And we were very Zionistic. My parents contributed to it. They participated in the groups that discussed it. And I guess some of that rubbed off. My dad was a meat packer. And I, as in many fairly large Jewish families, was thought, come into the business. Mm. And so I worked from the time I was very small as butcher, okay, which kind of plays itself out later on in life. But so I knew what it was like to work. I was active in high school, led a regular, fairly normal high school, public school life and education. I was president of the student government. I was active in gymnastics. And then went on to undergraduate school at Franklin and Marshall, a small liberal arts school in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, where we were also exposed to the Amish and Mennonite people that were a little different, and it was an education. That in itself was an education, right, and made me very interested in some of the other ways that people live their lives out. I went then to med school at the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia, and then did my residency in radiology, and then deciding that I didn't like that, I had been very fortunate to be exposed to one of the early pioneers in echocardiography and use of diagnostic ultrasound, Claude Joyner, in 1962 when I came to med school. And he kind of took me under his wing and exposed me to echocardiography, which then, of course, played itself out later in my career. I was also interested in nuclear medicine, and particularly in nuclear cardiology, and decided that I really didn't like radiology. I liked the physics and clinical aspects of both echocardiography and nuclear cardiology. And so another Penn graduate, Manny Viamonte, who was head of the radiology department here at the University of Miami, asked me to come down, start those 2 areas, and complete a residency in nuclear medicine, which is what I did. So I stayed at the university for almost 10 years and started other programs in both those fields and ran them for many years in other hospitals. As you can tell, I kind of like physics, and I kind of combination of clinical medicine and physics. But I was here during the influx from 71 until 80 of the Cuban
Right.
migration. And that was fascinating to me. But I don't have a very interesting background. It's that kind of sums up where I am. I've since been in private practice and taken an interest in what we do, because I think that, as I pointed out in the beginning, my age tends to have associated with it certain prejudices and biases, and there's certain aspects of that that are a little bit confusing to me. I had one patient from Saudi Arabia who I used to see periodically, and he would always hug me and say, "Cousin, you're my cousin." And I guess I had harbored, and still to some extent harbor, doubt about my relationship with Islam. And I thought, gosh, that's true.
Yeah.
We are cousins. Why all this animosity? And I wasn't ignorant of the history, of a 3,000-year history, but nevertheless, it created some confusion and some desire to kind of learn more about what it was that I seemed to have these prejudices about. And that's what took me into doing what we do now. I think to some extent those same prejudices are different from the younger generation. And sometimes I wonder if they hold us back or hold me back. But one thing I have learned that's been interesting is that through the dialogue, it is possible to, with time and some confrontation, to trust.
Absolutely.
And I've always felt that in order to solve a problem, to have a dialogue, it's two.
Yeah.
Two people have to talk.
Right.
Two groups have to talk. But two people talk and they learn to trust.
Yeah.
And even friendship, to some extent, comes out of this, with all of its complications, and all of its expectations. But I have learned that it's possible. And that's why I continue, and why I hope that it, perhaps if, that others will see that we can struggle with this and come out of it understanding one another a little bit, trusting one another, perhaps more so even than understanding, and that can serve as a basis for going forward.
Absolutely, yeah. No, I
And
think that's been very, very
kind of where I am.
important. I think the trust part of it. I think the other thing that has dawned on me as well is just that how, in a way, we live within our own worlds and our faith traditions, and there are things that are self-evident that sometimes need to be said. And that was one of the things that, with the our anti-Semitism statements and stuff like that. I mean, I thought it was self-evident that people realize that the majority, I would say majority of Muslims are not okay with, they completely condemn that sort of violence. Like, it's unacceptable. But then, actually it was because of you, Stuart, like, you had asked me, I was like, where are you had messaged me, I think earlier, about, where are the moderate Muslim voices. And where you're seeing that. And then I was like, well, I'm sure that everybody's been saying stuff. And then I looked online, I was searching, and I was like, there are very few statements that are actually condemning, anti-Semitic violence from Muslims. And so I was like, wow, that's very surprising to me. So I think that's part of it, is also just being able to communicate that, in learning what is the language of communicating in a pluralistic democracy, that there are ways that you need to say things, you need to support people, you need to be able to articulate your position and your viewpoint. And I think that's been really, really helpful, just sort of being able to have these conversations and having that honesty. Yeah.
Right.
That's been very, very helpful. Yeah.
It also, what comes along with it
is
an expectation And sometimes those expectations aren't completely met,
Sure.
and we take a step back.
Right.
But then we step forward and say, you didn't meet my expectation.
Right.
I wrote you, and
Right.
because I feel close to you now,
Sure.
and we've had a number of personal meetings.
Yeah.
and,
Yeah. Yeah.
I would expect that when things happen,
Right.
that you say something as I feel I would.
Right. Right.
And you responded. And that reinforced that relationship. So we
Absolutely.
can take another step forward.
Right. Exactly. Absolutely. So Dianne,
Peace.
talk to us about you.
So I have a very different story
Okay.
than most people. I was raised Catholic. And when I was young, I was married and I got divorced. And at that time, the Catholic Church really didn't embrace people
Right.
who were divorced. And I decided if the Catholic Church doesn't want me, then I don't really want to be part of a faith that I don't feel comfortable and
Sure.
accepting. So I really was not doing anything. And my father was fairly observant.
Mhm.
So I saw that in him. And I didn't really do anything about it. And then I met Stuart.
Mhm.
And he made it pretty clear that even if we weren't going to have children, whatever, that he was not getting involved with somebody who wasn't Jewish.
Mhm.
So I had been thinking about Judaism because my father worked in the garment industry, which
Mhm.
was primarily Jewish. And we had a lot of friends. Unlike most Christians that don't really know Jews, I knew a lot of Jews. A lot of our friends, we went to their celebrations and stuff. So it wasn't foreign. And I kind of thought to myself, maybe I should explore this, but I didn't do anything formal. So when he said that, I said, this is as good a time as any to do it. So I went down that path and I became a Jew by choice. But part of it is that I kind of made the commitment to myself that there wasn't a reason to give up a religion to embrace another if you weren't going to understand that religion.
Mhm.
Because part of my problem with Catholicism is I really didn't understand it that much. You just grow up and you learn certain things and you do them. And when you don't do them, you have to go atone for them.
Confess. Yeah.
And that didn't go with me, really. So I always credit my husband, my mother-in-law for teaching me about Judaism, my rabbi. And then I stumbled onto Hadassah,
Mhm.
which is a women's Zionist organization. It's the largest Jewish volunteer organization in the world. And they really taught me about the connection, that you were embracing not just a religion, but a peoplehood.
Mhm.
And so I really learned about the culture, about the religious practices, but mostly I learned about Israel. So I learned, one of the things that you learn is that to be Jewish is to embrace the land of Israel.
Mhm.
The history, the people, how we started there, how we remained there, how we have been expelled, come back, but still we survive. And then, of course, the Holocaust played a role in creating the state. So I really learned a lot about Israel, and I kind of fell in love. I fell in love with the country, the people, with the concept. I guess it was because I was looking for something.
Sure.
I was really looking for something to connect to. The funny thing, my mother, I thought she'd be upset when I was converting, and she said, well, at least you're going to do something. So my parents were fine with me converting because they were just happy to see me have some kind of
That's true.
faith-based practice. So, and one of the things I learned through Hadassah was that in Israel, despite what people might think, there is cooperation between the Arabs and the Jews because they have to.
Right.
They live in the same country. They use the same healthcare system. They go to the same schools. So at Hadassah, it was very easy. I mean, we have 25% of the staff is Palestinian. More are Arabs, Israeli Arabs. When patients come in the door, they check their religion at the door, and the caregiver checks his religion when he comes to work. And the Arab is in bed next to the Jew and the Druze and the Christian and whatever. And it seems for the most part to work. We have remarkable stories about, Palestinian doctors who saved the life of a Jewish child, and now he goes to the bar mitzvahs and the weddings and vice versa. So I really believed in that, and believed that it can work, and that believed that medicine could be a bridge to peace.
Right.
And that's right. And I'm a nurse midwife by profession. I'm a nurse, so that was kind of part of me, was that medicine is a tool that we can use to build bridges. So when October 7th came, it kind of turned everything upside down, because there were struggles in the hospital with the staff, and just like here, everybody trying to deal with this kumbaya aspect you have of everything, and that you can make everything better, and then these things happen. So when I heard about the Unbiased Initiative, I thought, I feel really strongly that we all really are just human beings and have common issues and want to solve them together. And that maybe this is something after October 7th, everybody feels like they want to do something.
Right.
So when they asked me to get involved, I said yes, because I'm comfortable with this work. I don't have a lot of, because of how I grew up, I don't have a lot of preconceived notions about Arabs, Jews, and whatever. It's mostly what I've learned as an adult. So I thought it was a good fit, and I've enjoyed it because it does challenge a lot of the things that you think are fine and you don't have to worry about it. It does challenge that. But by the same token, I feel that once people know each other, it's very hard to hate people that you're having a meal with.
Exactly.
And that their son, and that they talk about their wife or something. So I think it's important work, and I hope that we always use the phrase "move the needle," but if 10 people can change their idea about things, I think that's a start. We're not going to change the world, but we can do it. And I feel like through Hadassah, I try to make a bigger change, and then through this, a smaller change.
No, absolutely. You have a really interesting perspective because you're kind of an insider-outsider. What has been your general impression of your engagement with Muslims? Because you kind of converted into Judaism. You work with Muslims in Israel, and also now you're getting to know people here in the United States. What do you see are the commonalities and sort of the differences in terms of?
It's fascinating because I had to learn about Jewish practice, so I know more about Jewish practice than a lot of Jews do.
Exactly.
My friends call me and say, "What do we do for that holiday?"
So does your husband.
Yeah. So we're so similar. It's really so sad that we really are cousins.
Right.
Somebody was talking about burial practices and how quick you have a funeral. And I said, that's exactly the way Jews do things. We do the same thing. So it is sad. But politics is responsible for most of the world's ills and challenges. And I think if left to our own devices, we would all get along because it's much better for us. Because all we really want is to send our kids to school and have a home and raise our kids and have enough to eat and whatever. Do we really care about these other things? I don't think so.
Yeah.
But we're forced into those positions. And I work with we have a lot of initiatives in Hadassah to train Palestinian nurses and doctors to go back to their community. I'm involved with a group called Nurses in the Middle East, and they do that. So I have very positive opinion of Muslim healthcare workers. That's my experience, and how dedicated they are to their community, how they want to learn and help, and how we learn things from them. So I really didn't have that kind of ingrained thing like, oh, let's see what happens. But October 7th, what's that phrase where it's like it shakes you up a little bit, and you think, was I just being naive? So I'm trying to push that down and just say, no, we can go back to the way things were, because it's not the first time this has happened in history that there's clashes between different cultures, people. and you have to overcome it. I think the challenge is for us to overcome it in a positive way.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think that it's been very interesting because I've never been to Israel. I'm probably going to go in November. So there's a conference that I've been invited to, University of Haifa. So I think that'd be really interesting to go see. They have
And Haifa is largely an Arab town.
And they have a really good interfaith studies program there at the university. So I'll be giving a lecture there. But I think that's been something very interesting to hear and understand Israel from your perspectives as people that are kind of going there quite often, just to understand kind of the complexity and diversity of the society. Because I think that's another thing is that if you've never been there, you assume things about the society. And I think that that's something that in the long run, that's my hope with like the Abraham Accords as well, is once you actually start having Arabs going, hopefully it goes to Saudi Arabia and other places, you have people coming back and forth, they'll really be able to have that citizen-to-citizen diplomacy, right? I think that's something that's remarkable about the programs we have in America, like the Fulbright and all these sorts of programs, where once you have people to people connections across societies, across civilizations, you're able to kind of change people's entire perspectives in terms of like how they relate, their understanding. And I think that barrier, the fact that a lot of the Muslim countries don't recognize Israel, their people don't go there, they're not able to see what a remarkable society Israel is, and to create it from such a short period of time into a very dynamic and prosperous society that has its own challenges as well and its own problems. But to see that, I think that's quite an achievement, and that the society is able to build and create things. I think that's also something that's really valuable, because when you go to a lot of these other countries in the Middle East right now, they tend to be purely consumer societies. They just buy things, but then rarely are they producing technologies, ideas, things like that. And I think that's something that they could probably learn from Israel as well, kind of that entrepreneurship sort of as an idea for society. And especially, you're constrained, right? You're constrained by geography, by climate. But despite those constraints, you're able to develop and construct and grow things. I think that's really quite a remarkable experience. So I think just sort of that lived reality, I think, would be, in the long run, something very, very helpful for Muslims and Jews and to be able to do. Yeah.
And I think that they've tried that if one can get around the existential issues, which is a big issue, Israel has a lot to teach, and they want to share. They've already done that in many places in South America, for example. And their handling of water conservation, of growing products, is really secondary to none.
Exactly.
And I believe, from what we've seen, the willingness to share that is there.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, I think that in the long run, a lot of this stuff, I think, doing those trips, I think in the long run, I think would be also extremely helpful. And then I think, vice versa, to have, people from Israel and from the Jewish diaspora to go to Muslim countries and to be able to experience those societies and kind of the openness and willingness that it's not such a, it's not as hostile as it appears to be from the outside, that there is incredible spaces for generosity and hospitality and getting to know each other, Yeah. So it was one of the heartbreaking things I was listening to, it was a podcast about the 2 Israeli interns that were killed. And right before that, they actually had gone to Morocco, and they were there on kind of like an interfaith project, and then right after, and they were very much dedicated towards kind of building peace.
Unfortunately, that's what's happening in Boulder. We had a home in Boulder, and it's really a community that embraces. I can't say embraces diversity. It doesn't have a lot of diversity, but the concept of it.
Absolutely,
and there would more likely be as many rallies in support of something, an Arab Muslim issue, as there is for Jewish issue. And so the fact that it was targeted, I think the problem with that is the fact that it was targeted does that make people say maybe it's not worth those
Right.
efforts, because then we seem to be targeted
Right.
rather than rewarded
Right,
for those
exactly.
efforts.
For those
Right.
things.
So
Well, I mean, that's the thing.
that's
even
the danger of that.
with October 7th too. I
Yes.
mean, the people that were killed there, they were also,
Right.
so,
And that's something that's not generally appreciated
Yeah.
either.
yeah.
That the kibbutzim that were located near the
Yeah.
border very often were the most liberal
Yeah.
of the Israelis.
Right.
They were the group that used to take people to hospitals, et cetera, et cetera. And that was unfortunate. They were the most vulnerable.
Yeah.
We spent 4 days on a kibbutz a few weeks ago.
Mhm.
And, we see the fence and we see life on one side.
Right.
And it seems to me that they want what we all want.
Right.
The kids are running around. They want a certain amount of security and feed their families and do their thing, which is what really everyone wants. The educational aspect of that is the most difficult, I think. How does one establish the trust that if one's worried about existential issues,
Right.
how does one go on and then put these other things into focus? How do we get to young people so that this isn't repeated time after time? I am hoping that groups like this and the younger people establishing a dialogue like yourself offer that opportunity. But I have to say that I can only start with one person, which is me, and hope that serves as an example that it can be done, because otherwise we're kind of doomed to repeat it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
I think that we have to, these days, we can't rely on politicians and government to
absolutely.
make things
Right,
better. I think we
right.
have to find our own space
Exactly.
where we have
We have to
control
create it
and we
ourselves,
can
yeah.
make things
Exactly.
better in our own world.
Yeah.
And then maybe, if every single person we know does that,
Precisely.
then it'll just happen
Yeah.
by itself, because then we'll have tens of thousands of people doing that at the same time.
Exactly. Yeah.
But I'm losing my faith in the ability of government to help us
Yeah,
get out of that.
right now it's just a mess across the world, I
Right.
think, at this point.
Right.
But I think exactly having these sorts of small groups and sort of
Yeah.
being able to, and then I think, whatever our best practices are, the things that we're learning, being able to share that with other people and being able to replicate it in other parts of the country and other parts of the world, I
Right.
think are very important, So I'm very grateful for both of you in terms of just, taking the time and interest in putting your energy into developing these relationships and having these very tough conversations. And for Stuart especially, I think, you do a really great job of probing me and asking very difficult questions. But it really gets you to think, and it really helps me to be able to better understand. It just clarifies not just my own thinking, but also pushes me to think about things in different ways that I'm not used to. So
thank you for doing
I
that.
appreciate that.
Thank you for doing that.
Sure.
It means a lot.
Yeah.
It really does.
No, it's been
I
amazing.
I know I keep saying, she keeps reminding me that I say how old I am, but unfortunately that really colors
Mhm.
our feelings about this. And having been exposed to these different things, I approach this with a lot of skepticism and very strong feelings. And I don't have a lot of time to waste. I want to ask you the things that need to be asked and not dance around them.
No, I think
And
it's
fortunately, you've been honest enough
Sure.
to answer them. And that means a lot.
Thank you.
That means a lot.
Well, I mean, the good thing is that you're, I think, your age also, you've also been very thoughtful, right? So you just haven't grown old. I feel you've also grown wise. And that's really helpful because you're able then to bring a perspective to the conversation that most of us don't have, right? I mean, you've seen events and you've lived through things that we haven't been through. And so that gives us a different sort of lens in terms of thinking about understanding kind of what it means, right? But
I hope I don't take us back so far that it becomes difficult to get through that, to relive these kind of hurts or
No, I think it gives us a
Helpful,
good
yeah.
perspective. And then one of the things I like also about our group is that it's kind of multi-generational. So we have like younger people, we have older people, and so you have a much more comprehensive set of ages and sort of groups that are represented. So there's a diversity of opinions and perspectives, and each of the generations can kind of give their own perspective, and I think that's also been very helpful to us. Yeah, because it's uninteresting if there's only one
Right.
group of people, right, that are kind of, and we're just talking within our own generation, but you're able to get people from different countries, different generations, different even backgrounds here in the United States. I mean, you've grown up differently from Dianne, Susan, like everyone has had such interesting perspectives, right? And then, from conversion to interfaith marriage to all types of stuff. I mean, all of these different perspectives, I think, gives us different ways of thinking about it, and also gives us, hopefully, we're developing a language that we can talk about these things together with each other.
Oh, that's important.
That's really important. You have to have the words to be able
Absolutely.
to say that.
That's right.
It's not just a trust, but being able to communicate.
Right.
Yeah.
And understand the emotion attached to those
Right.
words, the subtleties
Yeah.
of differences in what a word means to you
Right.
and means to me.
Right.
I think that's very
Yeah. I mean, this is the thing that I think with our last dialogue. I mean, this when we were talking about kind of the emotional sort of characteristic of this idea of settler colonialism and all these sorts of things, and how it's resonating with you all, and I think that was something that you don't necessarily get the Jewish perspective on that, because I think there's a whole emotional level to sort of what that means. Even the word Zionism, and how Zionism has a resonance within the Jewish community, and then outside of the Jewish community, what Zionism means.
But it's been given that
Yeah.
negative connotation.
Yeah, exactly. That's
and
right.
it takes on.
Right.
I think that the conflation
Oh,
of
yeah,
Zionism and Judaism and Jew is sometimes not well understood.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And it can be negative in terms of that, if it's utilization,
right.
and becomes a political.
Right.
Judaism and you have Zionism becomes used as a political tool.
Well, that's the thing I've seen with anti-Semitism as well, like particularly like in the Muslim world. It's like everything is conflated with each other. Israeli, Jew, ideas of being and just kind of like a lot of the conspiracy theories and things like that as well. So being able to explain to people that there are differences. And their differences of opinion. And also, I think the other thing that's been really helpful from your perspective on Israel, and then even me kind of exploring a little bit more through, the Times of Israel and stuff like that, that there's so much diversity within the state of Israel itself.
Absolutely.
There's so much diversity among American Jews in terms of thinking about lots of these issues. So you can't just say this is the Jewish position, a Jewish perspective on one issue.
Absolutely.
And there's a lot. And, especially the other thing that I think has been real remarkable is just seeing how committed you all are to social justice. And that's been really, this whole Tikkun Olam thing, but just trying to make the world a better place and putting your time, your energy, your money into these sorts of philanthropic efforts. I think that's also been quite remarkable to see.
Well, what's the saying? If not now, when?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I appreciate you, Dianne, for supporting Stuart all the time. You're always at his side, and I really do appreciate that. I know
I appreciate
you could be doing other things, but you really are coming and supporting, and that's really very much appreciated.
Well,
so, with that, I want to thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for this,
everything.
and we're looking forward to continuing the conversation. So, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Of course.